Hey everyone, and welcome back to Life Unscripted podcast. This week, we want to speak about something that I think a lot of people deal with, and it's something that we've somewhat been dealing with this week. So we thought it'd be relevant to talk about in the podcast since it's very fresh in our heads, and it's something we've been talking about throughout this week, and that is falling off the wagon.
Falling off the wagon.
Falling off the wagon. So I thought to kick off this episode, you could tell us a little bit about what's been happening with you this week and us this week as well, if you want, and then we'll take it from there.
So we have actually had quite a busy week. Start of December, I guess everybody starts to do like their social activities and things. It was
Sarah's birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
It was my birthday last week. So birthday celebrations, I had the best week ever. So thank you for all the celebrations. It was really fun. But
My pleasure.
due to that, it messes up your routine a little bit. It was a midweek birthday. I was so glad to celebrate, but it does throw you off kilter a little bit. So of context, a couple of weeks ago, we sat down and had a bit of a chat in our own personal lives about our sort of productivity, and obviously with like the sunlight and things now, and it's a lot darker in the mornings, I have to get up quite early for work. And even the timings that we've been getting up at, there's no sunlight, especially for me. I'm working in an office, so I don't see any sun. There's a lack of vitamin D there. I feel quite tired anyway. You don't have the sun to kind of keep you awake.
Perk
and
you up.
that, what's that, your natural circadian rhythm? Is that what it's called? All of that's all a bit messed up at this time of year, and I think a lot of us go through maybe seasonal depression. But it's a real thing. Like, you do feel very tired at this time of year, and it coming to the end, especially heading up to Christmas break. Everything's like your last reserves are going and you're on your way. So basically we had a bit of a chat to say that I'm feeling really, really tired, and so were you, and our productivity is getting a bit messed up because of it. So we thought, what could we do? So we took a look at our routine, what time we should be getting up, what time we should be going to bed at, and we really sat down and talked about our week and our routine and made a bit more of a plan to make sure we were like our best selves for it. And I was really excited heading into like last week for it, and over the weekend we were getting up earlier, going to bed earlier. I felt really, really good. And then the birthday hit, and we had great plans. We went out for dinner. We were up a little bit later. So at the start of the week, I felt like it was going really, really well. We've been getting about 7.5 hours of sleep now, and feeling really energized. And it made such a difference even at the start of the week.
I've been getting close to 8, which has been huge.
Wow, that's
I know.
massive.
It's been really nice.
But it has made a difference. But I think even in the lead up to today, I've felt quite tired, and I feel like I'm starting to spiral and really fall off the wagon. And it kind of sparked a conversation for us today in the fact of like, did we actually fall off the wagon? So we had looked at quite a few things in our routine, like getting to bed earlier, like eating consistently, training when we can. This is across both of us, areas in which we can both improve on. Maybe not you for your training, but I'm just talking generally.
No, my training too, yeah, just because things are busy with business right now, it's still something I have to make sure I'm scheduling in and getting done, you know.
But whenever we sat down just before like starting the podcast, I was sort of saying like, oh, I feel like we're off the wagon. We haven't been consistent. And then you turn around and you're like, well, we have. Like, we've slept the best we have in probably a couple of months.
Yeah, I've slept, these last couple of weeks I've slept the best I have in, probably the last 3 or 4 months.
So essentially it was the script talking. Whenever I was saying we were looking at multiple things to try and improve. And as human beings, it's really difficult to do that, especially in a working life. So I think the win is that we did do something consistently this week, was getting to bed on time, sleeping better. And that has probably made us feel better for that busy week. So yeah, I think it was just a case of, we started to look at a couple of different areas in which we could improve. And we have started doing that. But my initial reaction was, what was the script saying? Well, we fell off the wagon. We didn't do it, did we? We only lasted for 3 days, and then we were out for the evening for dinner and whatever. And then the rest of the week was scrapped. But we did stay consistent in one element.
I guess there's like that fallacy that you always think in the future, like my diary's going to be not as busy, so I'm going to have more time for all this stuff and I'll be able to like work all this out a lot better. But it's a fallacy because it never happens. It's, you get 6 months in the future and your diary's as busy then as it is now. Or it's still fairly busy at least. And we convince ourselves that it'll be better in the future, but it never is. And I think it's just important to remember that it is also a busy time of year.
Yes, it is.
So we did decide to make these changes at a time of year where it's maybe going to get interfered with more often than not. But in spite of the fact that it was getting interfered with, we still were doing much. I still slept a lot better than what I'd been sleeping previously, which did really help. Just handling the scripts a lot easier, being like kind of like emotionally stable is a lot easier. Just feeling more productive and getting more done is a lot easier. Like all that's a lot easier when I'm better slept. Even my training is improved with my sleep. But I think it's also just to remember that it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
That's a big one with a script. Like, it needs to be an all or nothing thing. And this week is a bit of an exception in the sense that I had some other stuff on that I had to deal with that's not normal, so that kind of interfered a little bit with my week. And then on top of that, we spent a couple of days doing some celebratory things for your birthday, which was obviously so fun and incredible.
It was so fun, and I don't want to take away from that, but I think being able to go to bed on time really helped. Like, see if this week was the previous week and we were knackered, we were so tired, but this week felt like it, even though it was busy, we were still able to do everything because we were consistent in one element of what we discussed.
I guess the fall off the wagon bit that Sarah's more talking about is that we planned to do some other stuff as well that we weren't really consistent with. I think it's important to remember that we didn't actually discuss this, but it almost just happened organically. We fell back to what really the most important things were. So we couldn't get it all done this week because we were too busy. But we felt, for example, I think the fact that we maintained a somewhat consistent go to bed and wake up schedule and we slept better is something that I'm glad we fell back onto, and we let some of the other stuff go because that's more of a priority for me. And I think that's also important, is that you understand that life's always going to life, and there's never really going to come a time where there's not other things interfering with the stuff you're trying to do. Like, it's just, you're always going to have other responsibilities, and your diary's always going to be filling up with all kinds of stuff. It's important to like have those fallbacks as well. It's also about not putting too much on your plate and putting too much stress on yourself, especially in the beginning when we started to implement these new habits we wanted to do, and we started to try and sleep better. It's about being gentle with yourself in the sense that we're slowly been improving, and this week we got set off a little bit, and it's just implementing those things slowly over time. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. As long as it's good enough, and as long as you know you in some way have prioritized it. I'm glad we decided to prioritize the sleep over the other stuff and make sure we're getting that done. Because I think, the script's always going to beat you up for. I think that's when people go in too hastily with, like, they try and do too much, and then they start to fall off the wagon. The script beats them up about it, and then before they know it, they've completely fallen off. Whereas if they just maybe started a bit smaller and also maybe prioritized it a bit better in terms of what really matters and what's not as important to get in initially, they could have slowly built it up over time.
Because I think the script for me was starting to push and say, well, it was like I'd forgotten about the things that we did do, and I started to fall off the wagon on everything else. I was like, oh, well, I messed it up, didn't I? So what's the point, really? And that is a very heavy script for me. Like, it will start saying to me, well, you've messed up once, well, might as well just keep going on the same path.
Screw it.
But whenever I was starting to talk to you about it, you're like, but we were successful. We were consistent in a couple of elements, and we do feel better in general. And I think for me, if I hadn't spoken to you about it, and obviously we're in this together with what we're trying to do to help ourselves just feel a bit better during these like winter busy months. If I hadn't spoken to you about it, I would have definitely spiraled and stopped completely. And I think it's really easy for people to do that, whether it be about like food, like dieting, training, if you're trying to implement some habits. I think it's so easy to fall off the wagon. Like, and I think that's why it was really important to speak about it, because it's the script. The script's trying to come in and remind you of the things that it's a new thing you're trying to implement. So the script's going to be like, whoa, we don't like change. Let's just stay comfortable and let's just keep doing what you were doing before. But it's even things like, for me, I was spending too much time on my phone, and I was trying to stay connected with you like during the weeks. And it's very, very easy to just fall back into that habit, because it's comfortable and you're sitting and you're on TikTok or whatever and you're just chilling. But ultimately that wasn't making me feel good. And the script will still just be like, oh, well, you're comfy, like just sit here and doom scroll for the whole afternoon, like no bother. Like, but ultimately it doesn't make you feel good. You just need to take a step back and remember why you're doing what you're doing.
I think those habits are particularly tricky. Things like food and then things like social media. Like these ultra-processed foods and then social media, these things are manufactured to get you to eat more of them, want to eat more of them, to have them taste amazing, to send all kinds of triggers off in your brain about how awesome it is, how successful you've been at finding this really fatty, sugary thing. And also with social media, it's also designed to try and keep you in the platform and again send all those triggers off in your brain of like reward and dopamine. So it's a tough thing to try and sever the link with, for sure, because of all that.
Well, yes,
so I think it's also being gentle with yourself in that regard. I'm saying being gentle with yourself. Like you have to like step up and commit to getting it done. But there's a balance to be had with like not having that become counterproductive where you don't remember to just be kind to yourself sometimes as well, you know?
And I think having, whether it be a coach with your training or a community or like a friend group, or in our situation, like having a partner to be like, listen, I think we need to do some things to allow us to step up in our life. We're like kind of cruise. It's like we're on autopilot and we want to be fully functioning, awake, energized, because you felt like even your training was lacking. Like you weren't energized and you weren't rested enough to be going in and really train hard, and that's what sparked this conversation. But I'm so grateful to have you alongside me to maybe use the wrong word, but nag each other or remind each other about
nagging. We're just keeping each other.
I guess I just feel like I'm nagging.
You're not. You're just keeping each other accountable to the things we kind of set out to do at the end of the day, and it's not even keeping each other accountable, but it's reminding each other why we decided to do it.
Yeah.
And maybe that changes, and maybe we overshoot in some ways, or we take it a bit too far. We've gone a bit too far with this. It's becoming counterproductive. But it's just having those ongoing conversations about trying to do things to help us feel better at the end of the day, and then have us sleep better, and then that improves everything else that we're doing as well. But
yeah.
I think to pull back to kind of like the main topic, which is this falling off the wagon, I think it's something we've experienced kind of this week, like in a more small way.
Yeah.
But people do experience in a bigger way where they are maybe on like some kind of training or nutrition or fitness journey, for example, and they completely fall off the wagon. I think it's important to remember that the thing you said, having a coach or community, I think that's where they're so beneficial, because if you're reporting back to a community or a coach, especially a community or a coach, are like, it's okay that you've fallen off the wagon, but let's get back on.
Yeah.
It's like they're not going to scold you for the fact that you fell off. It's just that maybe you fall off for 3 days or a week. That just doesn't become longer than that, because it's something I spoke about before with, I think that's the power of having someone like that, because I speak to Liz every month. And then in terms of falling off the wagon with showing up as the real me and working on staying conscious and staying awake and not listening to the script, having someone to speak to every month, it's made that process a lot more effective and a lot more fun as well. So I think that can be really, really powerful in that regard, in terms of how do you how do you not keep falling off the wagon? I think going at it alone is great, and I'm sure people do succeed at it. But I think, in my experience, from myself and from what I've seen with like my clients and stuff, having a coach or a community around you is so helpful in terms of not allowing a small derailment to become a big one. Because I think that's really important to remember as well. To kind of tie into what I was saying earlier about, there's never really going to come a time where maybe the schedule's totally freed up or anything, and it's probably worthwhile knowing that when you go into a journey, or you make some new, you want to implement some new habits or sleep better, like what we've done, you're going to get derailed at some point. You might as well, you're best to accept that from the offset, that you're going to get derailed in some ways at some point. And it's about putting things in place like the coach or the community that's going to help make sure a small derailment doesn't become a big one. And you don't need to offset yourself any more than you would have already done in that instance.
I think having like that mental, it's like preparing. What's that saying? Failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
Yep,
is that what it's
that's
called?
it.
So I think I think having that mental attitude towards it and prepping yourself. It's the same way if like I remember whenever I moved to America, my dad sat me down and was like, "Listen, you're gonna hit like the November blues or the January blues," and I think knowing that element could come into play and preparing yourself for it can actually help you either deal with it or it doesn't happen at all. And that's when derailments happen. Because I think for this time of year, like I think the past couple of Christmases, I've ended up being ill at some point, or like having a bad cold, because it feels like in my line of work, this time of year gets really, really busy. All of a sudden I'm on holiday and not collapse, but you rest, and it just feels like my body's like, oh, okay, we can be sick now. However, this Christmas I was like, I'm determined not to get a cold. And I'm a relatively healthy person. Like during the year, I don't really get that many colds, touch wood, like it's usually fine. I think my issue is that up to this time of year, work is a big focus. But then because of that, I'm spending more time at work. Therefore, I don't have time to go train. I'm then not sleeping properly. And then all of a sudden I'm surprised that I get a cold during the Christmas holidays. And I think that's why this chat for us to help with our habits and our productivity was really beneficial, because sleep is paramount for rest and recovery. And no matter what anybody says, I mean, I used to be a person that would just go to bed at like maybe 11 o'clock midnight before I met you. And then you're like, no, like I need to go to sleep at this time. And I was like, what? You're crazy. But now
that time being earlier, by the way. I was like, I'm telling Sarah in this instance that I need to sleep more than what she's sleeping to function.
And I was like, no, I don't need that much sleep. Like, I'm fine. Then I realized, no, I do need that amount of sleep, and I feel so much better than I ever have. And I think in the past few months, we weren't really focusing on that. And again, the dials were just not focused on it. But I think during the busy times where they are working a bit more, you need to look after yourself, and you need to have the fundamentals and the basics in place so that you know you'll always be able to show up feeling at least your best.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're not 100%, but if you've got enough sleep, if you're eating good, if you're able to get some sort of training in amongst those busy times of year, you'll feel a lot better.
That is something that...
And it's something I'm still trying to learn. Like, I prioritize the wrong things sometimes.
You touched on training there. One thing I did want to speak about was even some takeaways that people can do with their training. Because it's remembering that you just I think it's about setting up plans for people that can work with the ebbs and flows of their life. So sometimes the training day will be turned up and you're going to have more time. And that period may last several weeks, but then other times there might be a random weekend there where things go a bit crazy. Like maybe we've had this week where things are a bit busier. And I think it's setting up a training program that can kind of like move with the ebbs and flows of your life, that can stay flexible, is really important, because like we spoke about in last episode with building strength and muscle, there's a certain dose that's like a really optimal dose for progress with strength and muscle building and fitness and cardio. And then there's a certain dose that's like the minimum effective dose. So it's enough to make progress, but it might not progress as fast than you would if you were following the more optimal dosage. And then there's like a maintenance dosage, which is less again. Now you're not going to be going forwards, but you're not really going to be going backwards either. And I think people being able to set that up in their training is really helpful as well. And one way I've set this up with clients to maybe provide an example, is by having priorities in their training. So let's say someone's like, under optimum circumstances, they can be in the gym doing strength training and building muscle and cardio 3 hours a week, 3 1-hour sessions a week, let's say. However, they've expressed to me that there is some times where I might not be able to fulfill that. So rather than just leave them to kind of work that out on their own and then some weeks feel like a failure because they've not fulfilled that 3-hour quota that we set, we just set up some priorities in their training. So I give them a program with 3 1-hour sessions, but those 1-hour sessions all have 3 sections. Section 1 is priority 1, section 2 is priority 2, and section 3 is priority 3. The whole workout, all 3 priorities together, would take them about 60 minutes. However, the priority 3 stuff is the least important stuff. It's stuff that will help your gains. You'll make better gains if you can get it in, but it's not essential. So let's say you can't do that one session, or you miss that for an entire week of sessions because you're busy. That's fine. Now the 3 workouts maybe take you 40-45 minutes. They're not maybe as effective, but they're still pretty effective. Then, or if you just get priority 1 done, for example, now the workouts are maybe only taking you 25-30 minutes. And maybe you are still making some slow gains, but we know at the very least you're not going backwards. And now you have 3 workouts. Each workout can be 25 to 30 minutes long, or they can be 40 to 45 minutes long, or they can be about 55 minutes to an hour long, depending on what you've got that week. And that's one way you could set your training up to be flexible. That's why I mean, when I said before, it's about being kind to yourself, but also you got to step up sometimes. So if someone's like starting to take the piss a little bit and they start to just keep always doing those 25, 30 minute kind of workouts. And when I genuinely talk to them, like, you could have probably done a bit more than this. I'm like, you got to step up if we really want to get these results that you want. So it's about having, and that's why I think having the coaching community can be helpful to push you, but help you pull back whenever it's necessary. So I would say to someone, you need to step up a little bit if we're going to get these results. You're kind of taking the mick a little bit by never doing it. But then it's also about being kind to yourself. So when you are actually having busier weeks, by allowing those priorities, you then can fall back a little bit, and you at least know at the very least you're not going backwards. You might be going forwards just a little bit, or a decent amount, or a lot, and you have that flexibility either way. So that's an example of how you can help yourself not fall off the wagon by just setting up a plan that's more flexible. And that's an example with training about how you can do that. And nutrition's the same, with people's nutrition. I've spoken about this before in my stories on Instagram, but understanding that for a good meal is we want to get protein and plants. That like 3 meals a day, say that's what most people are eating. We're eating protein and plants at every meal. That's like best case scenario. But what that looks like can change again depending on how busy you are in your life. So maybe like we always try and set like what the gold standard is. So like this is, if we can get this most of the time, you'll be amazing. So that's like making the food with mostly single ingredient foods, and you're cooking most of it from scratch. I'd say that's like the best. If you can do that as often as you can, that'd be amazing. However, there's some things where that's not possible. So maybe slightly down from that. And to be honest, I don't even know if this is slightly down from that. This is just a smart thing to do that I would actually keep on the same level as what I just said there. I mean, that's maybe making a bit extra and freezing some, for example. So you've now got some high quality, nutritious, protein and plant-based homemade foods that you can fall back on if you need to. But there is some times where maybe that is like one of those protein yogurts and like a banana. That's what your protein and plants meal looks like. Or you're maybe in the shop and you're trying to buy maybe like a chicken sandwich. That's like a good protein and plants option. And it's like having these fallbacks of like, I need to get protein and plants in every meal, and having a bit of a guidance about like, in certain situations, that's going to look different. So maybe it's in an airport and you're trying to get protein and plants, and literally all they have is they've got some, like an apple and like a protein bar. Is that best case scenario? Oh, probably not, but it's still better than nothing.
Yeah.
And it's about, again, with your nutrition as well, kind of having like, this is best case scenario, but having fallbacks that you can fall back into. So you're not failing. It's not a failure, because it's never a failure. It's just, because if I was just to tell people, you got to get 3 1-hour workouts a week, and you have to home cook all your meals, and they all have to contain 30 grams of protein, they all have to contain plenty of plants, people are going to be consistently failing at that because most people's lives don't allow for that all the time. And then they're just going to fall off the wagon. The script's going to beat them up like nobody's in.
Yeah. And then you feel terrible.
Whereas if you have more of this like flexible approach, it just means like, I know what the ideal week looks like. Like the ideal week for us, based on everything we discussed that we wanted to implement, looks like this. But it's okay if we have a busier week for whatever reason, with my stuff in business this week and with your birthday and everything, we were a bit busier. We were getting to bed a bit later. It's okay that it wasn't perfect. We're still just aiming to have like these rough fallback things that we're trying to fall back to. And that's why I said to you when you were like, oh, I don't know if we've done great this week. I'm like, we actually have.
Yeah.
Given everything that has happened, we've remained flexible, and what we've fallen back to
is our bare number one.
Has still been left us in a much better spot in terms of how we feel energetically and emotionally, and just on top of things than we otherwise would have been before we start actually making an effort with all this stuff. So I think that's my main takeaways in terms of falling off the wagon. I think it's understanding that the script's going to always want it to be all or nothing. It's going to delete and distort and generalize everything that happens anyway. So it's important, like I spoke about a couple of episodes ago, it's important to build a case in favor of yourself, because the script's always going to be building a case against you, and it's always going to be deleting and distorting everything and generalizing everything in your life for the worse. So you got to remember the things that you're doing right and the things that are worthwhile recording, that when you're having those scripty moments you can look back on. It's worthwhile having a coaching community who can support you. In our case, we have each other, just someone. And if you don't have that person in your immediate life, you can find them in a coach or a community. I think it's also setting up your journey, or like I spoke about there, your training and nutrition, to remain flexible and understand there's probably never going to come a time in the future where your diary's all cleared, and that you need to set things up from the get-go to work with the ebbs and flows of your life. Understand what best case scenario is, but also know what your options are when it's not best case scenario. Maybe that training dial has to be turned down a little bit because other things are taking precedence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. And I think even for this week, we were going into it knowing what our week was going to be. For me, it was a birthday surprise, so I wasn't expecting it. But I was planning, like, from the Saturday, Sunday, our food shop, our food. One thing I do think that was really helping us for the week was meal prepping. And that way about balancing and being flexible with your food and nutrition. If you're able to spend like an hour and a half or something, either cooking like homemade meals, planning what you're going to eat. And if you're tracking calories, whether you're trying to build muscle or lose weight, being organized and doing that before your week saves you a lot of time throughout the week. And that is like a technique in which can help you for those little busier moments in life. And for me, it was really helpful for this week, just to know that my breakfast was made, my lunch was made, dinners were made. We come in, depending what we were doing, the week got a bit busier as we went on, but having your fundamentals like your sleep and your food really helped with that week.
I think that was the main thing for me. That's something that's why that's something I wanted to implement, because my lunches had been going a bit awry.
Yeah.
So I was just having like a bowl of cereal and stuff for lunch some days because I was so busy. And I wasn't meeting that protein and plants minimum that I just spoke about. So I started to make these wraps. I've got some mince, some veggies in them, a little bit of cheese. And I put them in tin foil, and Sarah mostly made them, but we made them at the weekend. It didn't take that long to make them. And then it just meant I had these 5 wraps where every day I would come in, I'd take off the tin foil, I'd throw it in the air fryer for like 10 minutes. It would cook it, it would warm it up, it would make the wrap all crispy. And now I've got something that was just as easy to make as a bowl of cereal, but it's leaving me feeling way better, and I'm actually eating the things I know I need to be eating, supporting feeling the way I want and being able to train the way I want and get the results that I want from that stuff. So yeah, it was really beneficial in that regard for me.
And it just means that you don't have to think about it. But I even found in the latter half of the week, like obviously we're having like birthday cake and like sweets and like more refined sugars. I actually noticed that the last part of the week I felt quite anxious. In the script, it gave a big doorway for the script to come on in. So I think I'm starting to realize that even though we kind of tilted off the wagon, we weren't fully off the wagon, but even though we got the fundamentals like our food and our sleep, it really did make a difference. And at the start of the week, we were doing our little things that we discussed. The second I started introducing like sugar back in, the script was right there. And everybody's different, and I understand that. But for me, I've really noticed that whether I'm scrolling on TikTok, like I mean endlessly, like just doom scrolling, not looking for a recipe or DIY Christmas decoration. That's different. Doing something like that, I think really negatively impacts my brain. And I think learning about that is a big, big thing. But just being aware of the wagon and where you're on it, and giving yourself time and space to not be perfectly balanced on the wagon is absolutely fine. We are human at the end of the day, and we're not perfect. And we're not failing. I don't think even that word, I'm not a big fan of it, because it's a journey through it. And even if you do make a mistake or it's not quite perfect, you're learning from it. And this week, I think I'm starting to come around even just talking about it. But at the start, before we started talking about this, I was like, oh, I didn't do very good this week. But now I'm like, there was a few good things that we did, but also the things that I didn't manage to do, I've learned from it to be like, well, I'm not going to really let myself do that again next week because I didn't feel great.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is also why I've spoke about it for a long time now, but I've spoke about trying to just get the basics right. And I'll pull this back to like training and nutrition. Just getting the basics right in your training and nutrition, and not letting, because the internet is just full of all this additional crap that's just going to take up your time and money. Some of it may have value, but if you're not getting those like basics right, don't even worry about it. Like, are you strength training 1 or 2, 3 times a week? Are you doing some cardio 1, 2, 3 times a week? Are you largely trying to get those protein implants? Are you actually putting things in place to try and improve your sleep situation however you can? It's like, until you're doing those things consistently, don't worry about all this other crap that you could add, because you can end up just overwhelming yourself with all this stuff when it's to get some amazing results just really isn't that necessary. Does that make sense? So I think that's something I've harped on for a while, and it's something I try and do with my clients. Where I'm trying to take stuff away from them and help them try to do a bit less, because I already know they have so much on their plate. I don't want to, obviously when I say do less, like if someone comes to me and they're not training and they want to train, I'm like, well, we have to add that onto your plate and we got to train to get these results. But in general, I'm trying to set things up so where I'm not adding all this unnecessary crap into their life. They're going to be benign, so it's going to have no effect, or it's going to have a very small effect, or in some cases, it's almost like when you start to add too much, the stress of then trying to fulfill this and get it all done offsets any small benefit that could have been had, which I think is important as well with this. Like, we've been trying to implement some new stuff. I think it's also about keeping it fun and realizing that, life's supposed to be fun and we're supposed to enjoy it. And if we then let the script, because we are implementing this stuff to try and improve how we feel in our lives, but the script will try and, like I say, delete, distort, and generalize anything and get its hands on. And it'll start, especially when you start to become more conscious and aware, it has to find new ways in the back door. Like I said previously, it can't just stand in front of you anymore and be like, you're shit, mate, because you're like, shut up.
Yeah.
So it comes in the back door in new ways. And one of the ways it might start to, or at least it comes into the back door with me, is it starts to I totally blanked on what I was going to say, so I had to stop and think about it for a minute. My brain totally left the room for a second. But of course it did. The script doesn't want me to say what I'm going to say. But I've remembered it, and that's basically the fact that the script turns this thing we're trying to implement, this positive, into something that's a bit more of a negative. And now it's starting to beat me up for not being perfect and not being on it, when at the end of the day I was implementing those things to try and improve my life. But then the script tries to turn them into a negative, in the sense that if I'm not achieving them, it starts to try and add all this more stress into my life. So that's like an important balance to remember as well. Like, the script's always going to come in the back door, especially as you become more conscious. But the whole point of adding this stuff to your life was to make you feel better. And if it starts to become more of a hindrance and more of a stress, maybe it's worth looking at it and being like, right, can some of this go? Is it all necessary? Have I maybe overdone it a bit here? Because at the end of the day, it's supposed to improve your life. It's not supposed to become more of a source of stress, which I think when it becomes more of a source of stress, almost offsets the benefit that you would otherwise be getting with it.
And I think even implementing those goals, whether they be whatever they are, starting small and adding to it. So like, for instance, I don't know, like washing your face in the morning, brushing your teeth, making your bed, drinking your 2 liters of water, how much, whatever it is, knowing that you can tick those smaller things off, like getting up and going to work, you need to do that unless you're working from home, but you still need to get up and do your work. But I'm just saying, the smaller tasks that they are, and you feel like you can complete them, then you can add in, get your 10,000 steps, get your whatever grams of protein, get your 3 strength training sessions. As the weeks go on, like say you set yourself like 4 to 5 small goals in week 1, then you add in 1 or 2 more goals week 2, and then you keep going and going, and you realize that you absolutely can complete them and absolutely smash them. But as time goes on, you keep adding maybe slightly bigger goals, like going to the gym 3 times a week, and that way you're not overwhelmed. It's a way that you have the confidence, so I can complete these, and then you just add in another one and another one, and you just keep growing, and it should be consistent over time.
That's why I'm always hesitant to give out like number recommendations. Like, I will do it because I think it's helpful for people to kind of like gauge things. But like the 10,000 steps, it's about not comparing yourself to maybe what other people are doing. If you're someone who's averaging 2,000 steps a day, like when you're saying start small, don't worry about 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
If you could get 4,000 steps a day, which I'm sure you could look at your life and work out how you could go from 2,000 to 4,000 without completely overhauling your entire life. I'm sure you could do that. That would make a massive difference. You've literally doubled the amount of steps that you're doing. Yeah. So 10,000 gets thrown around as like and there's nothing wrong with 10,000 steps, but there's nothing magical about it either. And that's why I'm always hesitant to throw out numbers, because it's more for people. I'm like, people already largely know what they should be doing, or what they should be doing more of, or what they'd ideally like to be doing more of. And rather than, again, listening to the script trying to make it all or nothing, just look at where you're at and just increase that by 10%. And if you can consistently do that and do the things we spoke about to help you not fall off the wagon with it, that's going to have such an amazing impact on everything, on your life, on yourself. And then it's just slowly building that over time.
Definitely.
So anyway, that's all I've got for this topic today. If you're also finished, we can wrap up here. We anything more you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that's actually helped me once again. I feel like each week I'm coming to my own therapy session. No, it was really useful, and I hope maybe discussing it has provided some light for some other people as well.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's been a really fun episode. It's been really good. And if you're still with us, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate you all.
Yeah, so much. We really do. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
See you next week.
Bye. Yeah.